I thought you'd hate me, Sarek said, her voice low, almost brittle under the weight of expectation. She had rehearsed this sentence in her mind countless times, but now that it was out in the open, it sounded weaker than she'd imagined. She stared across the table at the human, Commander Elias Ward, waiting for the contempt she knew was coming. He didn't respond at first. His eyes, sharp but weary, studied her like a puzzle that had taken too long to solve. That silence was more terrifying than rage. Sarek had signed off on the operation that killed nearly 1,000 humans. Tactical precision, minimal collateral damage. Those were the lies they told themselves. In truth, she hadn't flinched. It was war. They were enemies. She had done what was expected of her. But now, facing this man, she realized the weight of it. He was one of the few survivors. He had every right to hate her. She had imagined this moment 100 ways. His fury, his accusation, his need for retribution. She thought he might lunge across the table or at least spit a curse in her direction. Instead, Elias smiled. It wasn't a grin of satisfaction or cruelty. It was a tired, sad smile, the kind worn by someone who had seen too much, lost too much, and learned the cost of staying angry for too long. You expected hate? He asked quietly. Sarek didn't answer. She just stared, trying to reconcile this human in front of her with the enemy she'd been taught to despise. He leaned back slightly. I don't have energy left for hate. Her brow furrowed. But I caused. I know what you caused, he said, not cruelly, just firmly. I was there. She closed her mouth, unsure how to respond. She had prepared for a fight. Apologies. Please. Defense. Anything but this. You think you're the first enemy I've met after the guns went silent. Elias continued. You think you're the first who expected me to scream or strike back. Sarek blinked. But we slaughtered your people. We slaughtered each other, he corrected. Don't pretend your side carried the whole weight. We both did things we regret. Or should. She wanted to argue, but the words didn't come. She'd been briefed on human aggression, warned of their brutality. And yet, here he sat, calm, quiet, more sorrowful than wrathful. You don't hate me? She asked again, incredulous. No, he said simply. Why not? Elias paused, letting the question linger in the space between them. Because someone has to be the first to stop. Might as well be me. It struck her like a blow. No doctrine had prepared her for this. The war had ended, but this moment felt like the true end, like a weight being lifted from a chest she didn't know was suffocating. He stood to leave, offering her a nod. We've all done terrible things. What matters is what we do now. She didn't know what to say. She only watched him go, confused by the one enemy who didn't act like one. Elias returned the next day. No security, no pretense. Just a worn uniform and a quiet presence. Sarek waited, still unsure whether yesterday had been a test or a trick. She watched him carefully, expecting the human unpredictability to erupt any moment. But again, he sat without anger. You asked why I don't hate you, he said, picking up the thread like it had never been dropped. Let me ask you something first. Have you ever lost someone who still talks to you in dreams? She stiffened. The question caught her off guard. Yes, she admitted after a pause. My brother. Elias nodded slowly. Mine was named Callan. We served together since basic. He was loud, stubborn, drove me crazy. But he was the kind of guy who'd give his rations to a starving kid, even if he hadn't eaten in days. Sarek didn't interrupt. She felt something shift, something human and real creeping into a space she'd only ever filled with doctrine and duty. He died because of a call you authorized, Elias said plainly. I know that. You know that. But hating you won't bring him back. It won't change the fire that burned him or the crater where he stood. Her eyes dropped. So you forgive me? He shook his head. Forgiveness is a process. I don't know if I've reached it, but I've chosen not to let vengeance own me. That's different. Sarek frowned. You don't even want justice? Justice. Elias gave a hollow chuckle. In war, everyone thinks they're justified. We avenge the fallen, then the other side does the same. It never ends. So we redefine justice. We rebuild. We teach our children not to make our mistakes. She thought of her own people, still holding memorials, still training for a war that was technically over. A culture trapped in a loop of bitterness. "You think humans are better than us," she said. "No," Elias replied. "We're not better. Just tired. Tired of burying friends. Tired of counting dead. At some point, you either let the pain rule you, or you decide it has to stop with you." Syrinx felt a deep, unsettling understanding forming. All her assumptions were being unmade. "I don't know what to do with this," she admitted. "I was prepared for everything except kindness." Elias smiled again, but it was a softer one this time. "That's the funny thing. You see a human with a gun and assume that's all we are. But the real strength? It's choosing not to pull the trigger when we could." Syrinx met his gaze. Something in her changed, small but irreversible. "You confuse me," she said. "Good," Elias replied. "Maybe confusion is the first step toward truth." He stood again, but this time she found herself wanting him to stay. Maybe, just maybe, the humans weren't the monsters her people feared. Maybe they were something far more dangerous, something that made peace possible. Elias didn't return the following day, but when he finally did, Syrinx noticed something different. Not in his face or tone. Those were as composed as ever, but in the way he carried a data slate, cradled like something sacred. "You should see this," he said without preamble. He slid it across the table, tapping the screen once. A video played, grainy, real. Flames engulfed a city skyline. Human emergency crews rushed through debris, carrying injured aliens on stretchers. A soldier shielded 2 reptilian children with his own body as a building collapsed. Then, a human medic gave her last dose of painkiller to an enemy combatant, whispering something before passing out for blood loss. Syrinx watched, silent. "That's what your people never saw," Elias said. "They only saw what we fired back." She stared at the screen. These are your people?" "Yeah." One of them was Callan. "He died not in combat, but pulling your wounded out of a bombed corridor." Her throat tightened. "We never got this footage." "No," Elias said, "because your command didn't want to believe we were capable of mercy. That ruins the image of the bloodthirsty human, doesn't it?" She couldn't look away. The faces on the screen contradicted everything she'd been taught. Not conquerors, not savages, just people. "Why help us?" she whispered. "Because we remember what it's like to be broken," he answered. "Earth nearly wiped itself out more than once. We learned the hard way that if you only protect your own, you end up alone." He leaned forward, his voice firmer now. "You think strength is in domination, but real strength? It's holding the line even when the world is falling apart, because someone else's life is worth just as much as yours, even when they're on the other side." Syrinx's chest ached in a way she didn't expect. This wasn't strategy. This wasn't diplomacy. It was something far older and far more powerful. She remembered training sessions where they laughed at the chaos of human history. All those wars, all that division. And yet, here they were, still standing, still reaching out. "We thought you were dangerous because you refused to kneel," she murmured. "We are dangerous," Elias replied, "but not because we don't kneel. Because we don't stop getting back up." The words hit harder than any weapon. It was terrifying in a way. Not because they were indestructible, but because they endured through grief, through fire, through betrayal, and somehow still believed in rebuilding. "I used to think we had nothing to learn from humans," she admitted. "But now, you're starting to see us." She nodded slowly, and I don't know whether to be afraid or inspired. Elias stood. "Maybe both. But either way, we're not what you were told. We never were." He left the slate behind. She clutched it like proof of something sacred. Proof that humanity's true weapon wasn't rage, but the refusal to lose their soul in the war. The war had ended a year ago, but for Syrinx, peace didn't come until today. She walked slowly through the integration zone on Nivera 3, a colony world rebuilt from ash and ruin. Human children ran beside alien ones, chasing drones and laughter in equal measure. Engineers from both sides collaborated at open workstations. Food stalls served Terran and Kithran dishes side by side. This wasn't what her people had imagined peace would look like. They thought humans would demand subjugation, that Earth would build monuments to its victory, rewriting history to glorify its own. But none of that had happened. Instead, humans had invited their former enemies to rebuild with them. Serex had stayed behind, volunteering as a liaison for the Human-Kithrin Reconciliation Initiative. At first, it was guilt, then curiosity. Now, she wasn't sure what kept her going. Perhaps the simple truth that something had changed in her that couldn't be undone. She paused near a young sapling growing in alien soil, an earth tree, genetically adapted to survive here. It was small now, its roots new and uncertain, but it would thrive. Humans made sure of that. A familiar voice echoed from her datapad. A recorded message. "Elias, I'm heading back to Earth," he said. "Too many battles fought, not enough time spent living. I've done what I can. The rest is up to others now. People like you." She sat, listening carefully, as if the words were the last breath of a story still being written. "I don't believe in saviors," the recording continued, "but I believe in witnesses. People who saw the worst and still chose to build something better. That's who we need now. That's who you are." Serex closed her eyes. She could still see him sitting across from her on that first day. Still remember the moment she expected hatred and instead received something infinitely heavier: compassion. He had carried pain without letting it define him. And somehow, by refusing to hate her, he had freed her from hating herself. Later that evening, she planted a second tree beside the first, one native to her world, a symbol not just of unity, but of mutual survival. Children gathered curiously nearby, watching the ceremony. She knelt beside them and said, "These two trees are different, but they grow side by side, just like we can." They didn't understand the full weight of her words. Not yet, but someday they would. She looked up at the sky, toward the stars humans once fell from like fire, and whispered to no one in particular, "I thought you'd hate me." She paused, then smiled, softly to herself. "But you didn't." In the silence that followed, the leaves rustled as if to echo the truth. Humanity had changed the galaxy not by conquering it, but by healing it. And in doing so, they taught others how to become something stronger, something human.